So for those of you who have been on the channel for a while, you'll know that Battlefield 1 was probably not my favourite installment of the franchise, for many reasons that I'm going to dive into. But today, I figured it was kind of useful to dive back into Battlefield 1. It's been quite a while since the game released. In fact, I think it's been coming up on 3 years now since Battlefield 1 actually first came out and was a huge commercial and large-scale social media success for Battlefield in terms of growing as a franchise at the very least. And today, I thought I'd revisit it, talk about what I liked, and talk about what still bothers me today about this game. I'm just going to go through my order of thoughts, purely because I feel as though that serves as the best representation of what I actually thought on this sort of dive back into the game, rather than, me just spewing out stuff I've said before. And the first thing that really struck me about Battlefield 1 is just how different it is map-wise to many other Battlefields that we've played before. Now, the thing that strikes me about this game is just the sheer lack of cover, and something that I think really infuriated me when I did originally play the game was just the fact that there were so many big stretches of open space that didn't really achieve much. And whilst it did allow vehicles to certainly thrive, which is something I think we're not seeing so much of in Battlefield 5, I don't think the vehicles were anything particularly special to the point where people wanted to use them so extensively anyway. So it kind of felt like a weird mishmash of things. And I think the thing that really annoyed me about this, and I think the thing that still does on this dive today, is just the fact that there are so many open stretches of space, but when you actually get into engagements in critical areas, you can really see that the guys who were designing these maps clearly knew what they were doing. The urban environments and objective environments are really well thought out and are the similar level to what we'd expect from a Battlefield game. So it really does kind of confuse me, and I don't really get it. I don't really get how they managed to get the sort of in-between of these objective spaces so strangely off, but it just appears to be the case. I hope we don't go back to something like this, but I really feel as though there is a fantastic way to integrate close quarter spaces and large expansive spaces while still offering infantrymen a good level of cover and ability to maneuver. And I think whether that's foliage and something you're looking to do in that dynamic, or if it's hard cover and something you can see before in things like Operation Firestorm, things like Caspian Border, there are many examples where Battlefields of the past have done a fantastic job at this, but I think this was a huge swing and a miss on Battlefield 1. But I will tell you one thing, and this is something that I think probably was the most enjoyable part of this today, is just going back into a game where bugs and things like that just don't seem to really be a huge issue. Like, I didn't have any performance problems playing on either PlayStation or PC. It was so smooth. It's like going from, I don't know, a sports car with zero suspension to a 4x4 Jeep that has the best suspension in the world possible. It was just so strange. Like, playing Battlefield 1, you really kind of get an idea, an understanding of how Battlefield 5's performance and bugs and network issues have really come to plague the gameplay environment for that game. And I think it's almost hard to remember Battlefield 5 in the early stages when that was less of an issue. So going back to Battlefield 1 was actually kind of refreshing in that sense. It was really nice to play something that felt buttery smooth, that felt like, it wasn't really running into any problems. It's a Battlefield game. There are going to be some hiccups here and there, but nothing overly dramatic like we've seen in Battlefield 5. Luckily that is improving now, but again, it was just a really nice change of pace. And something that I don't think I ever want to see again in terms of change of paces is grenade spam. I honestly don't really know how we managed to do this in Battlefield 1. I felt like a Battlefield 1 without grenade spam would have been a much beautiful and brighter place. And the reason I say this is purely because Battlefield 1 just somehow took everything we'd learned from previous Battlefields, 4, 3, all of the other ones, all of the ones we'd already had, and it went, you know what we need? That grenade spam that we've steadily learned that our community despises? Yeah, let's just put that straight back in. And it was something that I just never understood from a design standpoint, and it never really got patched. Like, they did some stuff to try and alleviate it, but ultimately it's still very much there in Battlefield 1. There isn't much of a penalty on grenades. And I'm really glad that Battlefield 5, although not perfect, has certainly avoided this element of the game. But something that did strike me as outstanding, and something that I think many people will remember for Battlefield 1, and something that I really do hope the franchise remembers as a whole, regardless of what time period and era it is that war feeling. Battlefield 1 as a game does a fantastic job of immersing you in a wartime environment. The scenery around you, the sounds you're hearing, everything feels fantastic in that sense, and I think that's a really great credit to the people who worked on the game. I think it's something that we've seen so very little of in Battlefield 5 as a World War II setting, which is really mind-blowing considering World War I and World War II were some of the most catastrophic warfare events going. And I really do hope that we get to see this kind of atmospheric feel return in the Japanese theatre and Pacific theatres in Battlefield 5, but even in the future, like Battlefield 4 and 3 weren't really great at war feeling. Aftermath is probably the only DLC I can point to that went, yeah, you know, we know what we're doing in this department. So I would really like to see something like this come back to the game, with just a little bit more emphasis and a little bit more focus. And I think there are lots of modern shooters around, especially Squad at the moment, which do a great job of building an atmospheric environment and making you feel as though you're really engaging in a conflict around you. So should we return to the future, I really hope they look at Battlefield 1 as a gold standard of creating atmosphere, regardless of, you know, whatever gameplay features that I have issue with in between. Well, let's lead on from that. We can't really get round Battlefield 5 without talking about the gunplay. Now, whilst it has been a while since my initial frustrations with this were sort of surfaced, I think it's safe to say even going back now, I can really understand why I didn't enjoy the title, purely because the things surrounding spread and just the way the weapon mechanics were designed, although perhaps a great way to sort of determine balance between classes, for me personally didn't represent a fun way of playing Battlefield. You know, we had things like the sweet spot mechanic, which basically just awarded you for being a sniper in open maps with basically zero cover, which was something I never really understood and something I never want to see again in a Battlefield title. And just in terms of the way some of the weapons work, you know, if I'm aiming at a target and I'm compensating for recoil, I expect my bullets to be on target. I don't really care for things like spread and that, just because I feel as though it creates an environment where your guns just don't handle like you want them to. And I don't really feel as though any of games now should incorporate this design. If you're looking to be a sort of historical modern shooter regardless, just the way gunplay was managed in Battlefield 1, I think made players who felt as though they were playing relatively skillfully kind of push away from the game, because you can see it. In Battlefield 5, you know, the gunplay is probably one of the strongest elements, and I think skillful players are rewarded, whereas in Battlefield 1, the sort of skillful element was more surrounding your movement as opposed to your weapon handling, because most of the spread was random. And the issue this creates is that you have all of these players who are kind of forced into close quarters engagements, and close quarters engagements just end up being lots of clusterfucks of people, so there's no way for you to really manage a situation. I think this was probably the most damning and disappointing part of Battlefield, at least for Battlefield 1, and I think it's something that I think we need to learn from as a franchise, purely because things like Battlefield 3 have already shown us what the gold standard for weapon handling and how people have a satisfying gunplay experience can look like. But finally, I want to end it on a positive note. I think some of the DLC additions to Battlefield 1 were really good for the game. I think even going back now, whilst I don't agree with some of the map design as a whole, which kind of lets it down, I think some of the maps in Battlefield 5's DLC, especially in the French one, really offered some great experiences, and I think it's something that of course we are missing from Battlefield 5 right now, although it is on a slightly improved path, and I do hope the Pacific does compensate for that. I think Battlefield 1 was a really great shout back to thematic DLCs, the kind of things that made Battlefield 3 special, and I think we're starting to see it again here in Battlefield 5, and I hope this is something that continues to be a trend for the franchise. But anywho folks, that's been me, the Tactical Brit. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon in another video.